Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Sorry, I'm looking in multiple directions as we've got folks online and in person. So let me start out a little bit more humanly and say, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. This is our Disability Roadmap film event, and it's hosted by the Center on Disability and Community Inclusion right here at the University of Vermont. My name is Jesse Suter. I'm the director of the center, and I use he, him pronouns. And as a visual description, I'm a 49-year-old white man, bald, with a short cropped mustache and beard, wearing dark gray pants and a dark gray, I don't wear this very often, sport jacket. Someone help me out. So I'm really excited for today's event. This has been a long time planning, and it's just so exciting. I'm so excited to see you here. We're going to watch two amazing award-winning documentary films together. And after the films, we're going to have a discussion with the filmmakers. And part of that is going to be prepared questions from me, and then we're going to open it up to questions from you. So both people online as well as people in the audience here. So I'm going to introduce Dan and Samuel Abib in just a minute. But as a director, I got a few people that I want to thank and also a few other messages. So first of all, special thank you and welcome to everyone who just came over from the Vermont Family Network Conference this morning. We are sharing the same space, and I'm just so grateful for the Vermont Family Network for working with us and collaborating so we could line up our events and make this more accessible. So thank you to Jackie, Rachel, Karen, and everybody at the Vermont Family Network. Also, congratulations on your conference this morning. The theme was inclusion and well-being. So how perfect is that? Also, speaking of perfection, some of you in the room may have noticed that there's an art exhibit outside, and Inclusive Arts Vermont is doing a showcase, and the exhibit is called Masked. So it features visual artwork by 22 Vermonters with disabilities, and each piece demonstrates the artist's creative expression of the title theme, Masked. Masked is on display at the Davis Center right here through May 2nd. And you can learn, this is when I should be remembering that I had other slides. Thank you again to the Vermont Family Network. And the slide that I'm putting up now has images of several of the artists that are featured here in the exhibit. And the link that is on the screen and that we'll share with everyone who registered is to their website, where there's also audio descriptions of each of the visual art works that is shared. So that's my segue to say, and speaking of masks, thank you for everyone that's wearing one. Asking our attendees to wear masks today came from people with disabilities who worked with us to plan this event. The COVID-19 pandemic has not ended, and many people with disabilities and chronic health conditions are at higher risk, and masks work. For those of us that are up on stage, we're going to be taking them off so you can more easily hear us, but otherwise going to have our masks on. This is also a moment when I want to say this is just one way that we're trying to make this event accessible. And for that, I really want to thank our Director of Communications at our center, Audrey Homan. They recently completed an accessible events guide for our center, but also as a resource for the university. And we're trying to use those best practices and tips that are in that guide in our event today. So thank you to Audrey. This was an extra surprise event that we did this year, and they really jumped in and have worked incredibly hard to make this valuable. So with that, I want to introduce our guests. So Dan Abib works full-time as the Inclusive Communities Project Director at the Westchester Institute for Human Development. And that's a sister center to our Center on Disability and Community Inclusion. They're one of the centers in New York. He's the creator of the nationally broadcast documentary films, Intelligent Lives, Who Cares About Kelsey, and Including Samuel. From 2014 to 2017, Dan served on the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities under President Barack Obama. And Dan, you joined us in Vermont for screenings for each of those three earlier films, and it's great to have you back. As I was frantically searching for my copy of Including Samuel the other week. I didn't find that, although we've got it for today. But I did find advertising flyer, Dan, from 2008 when you were here. So that was fun. I can still find some things in my office. And Samuel Abib works part-time as a multimedia production assistant and public speaker at the Westchester Institute. He's an aspiring filmmaker and community college student. In 2016, made a film about disability rights leader, Judith Heumann, that was featured in the Breaking Down Barriers Film Festival in Moscow, Russia. And he was a story consultant on Dan's film, Mr. Connolly Has ALS. Please join me in welcoming Dan and Samuel Abib.
Thank you, Jesse. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start with some introductions for Including Samuel, and then Samuel's going to introduce our second film, all here in one stretch here. I'll do a visual description as well for us. We didn't have that pre-programmed, so if you don't mind, Samuel, I'll try and wing it for both of us. I'm a balding 57-year-old man. He's a much more handsome 23-year-old young man who's not balding at all, has a great head of hair, brown hair. I'm wearing a green sweater, although I had to check with my wife once because I am colorblind. Is this sweater green or gray? She told me it was green. I hope that's right. And blue pants and brown shoes. Samuel's looking very sharp in his jeans and gray Vans. Samuel uses a wheelchair for mobility and a communication device for a lot of his communication. So we are really happy to be here. This definitely, as Jesse says, feels a little bit like of a homecoming for us, especially for me, because I've been here a lot, but Samuel's been really excited for this trip. As Jesse said, we've shown all of our previous major films here, and we have extremely fond memories of all those events, but particularly meaningful is coming here with Including Samuel. I was just sharing with Samuel about 12 years ago. Michael Jane Greco was here, Jesse was here, Michael, I think, was the lead host of that event, had us come to UVM to show that film. We got to meet incredible people and hear the reaction to the film. Some of the people we met that time are actually here today. Michael Wood-Lewis, Valerie Wood-Lewis were people that we got to know who told us about an amazing camp called Double H Ranch up in the Adirondacks, part of the Paul Newman kind of hole-in-the-wall gang camps that Samuel ended up going because of that interaction, and was a huge part of his life for about 7 years. And you'll see some clips of that in the film that Samuel will introduce. So just a few words about Including Samuel before I turn it over to Samuel to introduce our other film today. When you have a child with a disability, which we did 23 years ago, your life changes in dramatic ways. And I don't want to sugarcoat what it was like at first. It was scary, it was confusing, it was very bewildering to think about how we're going to navigate all these systems that we were never trained to navigate, you know, healthcare systems and education systems and legal systems, all while navigating all the equipment and medicine and doctor's appointments and therapies and accessibility issues and ableism that we were also navigating all at the same time. And thankfully, we found out about a leadership series out of the University of New Hampshire that's part of this Partners in Policymaking model, which I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure is existing here in Vermont as well now. And Betsy took it first, and she said, Dan, you've got to take this course. It was a year-long series in which we learned about all these systems, and we learned about disability rights. And perhaps most importantly, we met incredible disability role models like Keith Jones and Bob Williams and Norman Kuntz. And we started seeing a vision for Samuel as an adult, which you are now, that was really different from all the fear and anxiety and sense of loss and grief we were feeling at the time. It was a vision of a full life, living in the community, going to school, having friends, having relationships, working, living independently, because we saw that in these other examples. So it's really powerful to kind of now come full circle and be co-directing and co-producing a film with Samuel now that he's navigated this life, and now you're navigating your own life in your own incredible ways. So the first film gets to that backstory of how we tried to navigate as a family, Samuel's early years. And the second film is Samuel's own story in his own words. So with that, Samuel, would you share, let's turn your wheelchair off so you don't fly off the stage inadvertently. Would you share a little bit about the film that we're going to watch after Including Samuel?
Since January 2020, I have been interviewing some awesome adults with disabilities about relationships, work, education, living on their own, healthcare, finding support people, and every part of transitioning to adulthood. Before COVID, we traveled to do interviews and filming in Washington, D.C. We had to stop traveling for a while in 2020 and 2021. But once we got fully vaccinated, we got back on the road. We traveled to Indianapolis and New York City to film. I filmed my own life from my perspective with 2 GoPro cameras mounted on my wheelchair. And my dad has been filming and photographing my life. We are co-directing the film. A short version of the film is called My Disability Roadmap, and it premiered on the New York Times website in May of 2022. We are currently in production of the feature-length film, which will come out in 2024. We hope you enjoy both films.
And with that, we'll start including Samuel. That goes about 56 minutes. There'll be a 20-minute break. Promptly at 20 minutes, we'll start My Disability Roadmap. So enjoy the first film, and we're so happy you're here today. Thank you.
All right. So this is Jesse Suter again. I'm up on stage with Dan and Samuel, and we're going to move to the filmmakers discussion part of this. So we're going to start with some prepared questions that I'm going to be asking of Dan and Samuel. And then after that, we're going to move to audience questions. I believe there's some questions online, and hopefully we'll have some in the room. So I'll be navigating that when we get there. I apologize for stepping away from my seat. That's exactly what I was navigating and negotiating over there in the corner, is how we're going to do this, because we're doing it lots of ways. So thank you both for the film. That was great. It was good to see it again. And let me get into the questions. The first one's for you, Samuel. What are you up to now?
I work part-time at the Westchester Institute for Human Development doing film work and presentations. I am also in college at NHTI, the local community college in Concord, New Hampshire. I am working on getting my liberal arts associate's degree. I have been taking 1 class a semester and have a 3.0 GPA. So far I have taken sociology, cultural anthropology, psychology, contemporary ethical issues, U.S. history, social media strategy, mindful communications, and Western civilization. This semester I'm taking geology. I also joined the Environmental Action Club at school. I have enjoyed meeting new people. I am hoping to make more friends at college and maybe find a girlfriend. Also, in September of 2021 I moved into my own home, an addition on my parents' place.
The next question we wrote for Samuel and Dan, so you guys can navigate how you want to answer this, and I'll give you the mic. How did the idea for the film come about?
I wanted to figure out how to follow my dreams. As I said in the film, nobody tells you how to be an adult, let alone an adult with a disability. I decided to interview people like Judy Heumann, Bob Williams, and Keith Jones because they are people who I look up to. They are great advocates and role models for kids and young adults with disabilities. I wanted to ask them about their transition to adulthood to help me and others be successful. Success can be defined in many ways. These are just the people I wanted to have as my mentors.
So adding on to what Samuel said, first of all, while I have the mic again, I want to thank again everyone for being here and staying through the second part of this presentation, and the CDCI and Jesse and your whole team for hosting us. It's really great to be back at UVM and with real people in person and not just on screens. So in addition to what Samuel said about the film, this is my 4th feature-length film, and I've done about 20 short films. The first one I've co-directed with Samuel, and it just felt like the right time to both work together, which has been incredibly fun and rewarding to co-direct and co-produce. This has just been the best experience of my life. and we're continuing, as we'll talk about, to work on a feature-length version, but also to put the voices of people with disabilities completely in the foreground. And, you know, I know how to get movies made. I know how to raise money. I know how to, do a lot of the technical things, but I am not a person with a disability. And I can't speak from that first person voice, but Samuel can. So, and not only that, but Judy Heumann can, and Bob Williams can, and Keith Jones, and Maysoon Zayid, and Ali Stroker, and Andrew Peterson. You know, we wanted to put their voices first and forefront. And they are the stars of the film. And we also made a commitment from the beginning to make the majority of our production and outreach crew paid people with, paying people to do that work would be people with disabilities. And we're living up to that. You know, the majority of the people working on this film are also people with disabilities. So yeah, thank you. And like with any important social change movement, it doesn't happen passively. It has to happen actively. So we've been recruiting and finding amazingly talented people to do the work. So I guess that kind of captures the idea for the film, is how does Sam and I work together to use his journey into adulthood to bring in the voices of all these incredible people and get at some issues that I think are universal for many, many people with disabilities.
Great, thank you. So the next question is a question that we prepared, but I also heard that it just recently came up on chat in Zoom, which is, why are we showing this? And so the question for you, Samuel, what are your hopes and dreams for the new film?
My goal for the film is that people won't talk down to people with disabilities. I want everyone to know that people with disabilities demand respect and rights. And I want other young adults with disabilities to have the same opportunities that I have had for healthcare, inclusive education, college, assistive technology, jobs, making friends, and independent living. I want people to learn from disability role models like Judy Heumann and Bob Williams. I want to help people learn how to live a full life with a disability as they transition to an adult by focusing on all of the possibilities of work, education, and disability rights.
Thank you. I have to learn to start waiting for that. The next question is for you, Dan. What are the central obstacles that you're still seeing for inclusion in K-12 school, college, and employment?
So we'll be taking the next hour to have this discussion about this. No, it's a good question, a huge question. This film obviously focuses largely on transition years because Sam and I talked about the fact that there's this transition cliff that I think some of you are probably familiar with. When you leave the structure and supports of high school and potentially even up till age 21 or whatever time you get those services, a lot of adults with disabilities don't have the kind of innovative supports and staffing and technology access that you might have as a younger person. Not only that, but you may not have the kind of really supportive and engaged medical care that you often can access in pediatric care that you can't access as adults. So just in those transition years, there's so much for us to look at in terms of obstacles. As Samuel just said, access to technology, access to higher education with the supports that you need to succeed in higher education. Samuel has a reasonable accommodation plan, which makes sure you have extra time on your tests, or a seating position in the class that works, maybe a note taker that helps. Access to good medical care, access to housing, safe and secure housing that's accessible, which is incredibly hard to come by in New Hampshire, and I'm guessing it's incredibly hard to come by here in Vermont. Accessible, affordable housing. I can go on and on. I think these are the central obstacles. Employers that believe that people with disabilities have a place in every workplace and can add just as much, if not in some cases more, than non-disabled people to the workforce. And so how do you change these things, right? To some extent, you change them through laws and enforcement of laws. I know under the Obama administration, there was a lot of enforcement around ADA and IDEA that fell off some after the following administration. The Biden administration seems to be picking it up slowly, but not as aggressively. And I've heard from people in DC that they're not pushing it as hard as the Obama administration did. But it also comes down to cultural change. And as we saw, right, Samuel, through Maysoon, through Judy, through all these Ali Stroker, these media makers, and hopefully us, can also start to change the culture and cultural assumptions and presumptions around people with disability. So, I mean, there's so much to talk about here, but those are, I think the film, we hope, is hitting on some of those challenges and also showing some of the paths to getting through them, like we try to do with Including Samuel.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that answer, because there's many groups in Vermont that are sharing a lot of those same concerns. We recently did a community needs assessment. Top choice was housing. So just like you shared. And then also, I'm really glad that we're doing this here at the University of Vermont, because there's lots of conversations about ways that we need to better support students. So thank you. All right, the next question is for you, Samuel. The mentors that you interview give powerful advice. Is there one piece of advice that you've most taken to heart, or advice that may benefit other young adults with disabilities?
The advice I got from Maysoon was, "You are not alone. Find your community." That was powerful advice, because I've always had a strong community, starting with Beaver Meadow Elementary School. I'm continuing to find my community at NHTI Community College, in the disability rights community, at work at the Westchester Institute for Human Development, and in my hometown of Concord, New Hampshire.
Oh, okay. This is Jesse again. For people hearing Dan made a motion, I thought you were going to grab the mic. I'd be open to that. That the community piece is really important. And again, at the University of Vermont, there's a recent group of students formed Disabled Students Union just this academic year. So I think that's a point well taken. Next question is for you, Dan. Storytelling through video is such a collaborative process. You've talked about this a little bit already, but what was it like creating a film with your son?
So I think Sam was going to tell a couple of stories about some of the ups and downs of the process in a second, because we've had a lot of fun adventures, as we always do in life, involving travel and bathrooms and all kinds of interesting things that come up when you are navigating in a wheelchair. But I would say, you know, the thing that I've really learned to do with this process, which I've actually enjoyed a lot, is slow down. You know, you all are here today and you're incredibly understanding that it takes Samuel a little time for motor planning, right? And to get to that switch, to hit it, it might take you 20 or 30 or 40 seconds, and that's okay. That's not the way I typically roll. Like, I grew up in New Jersey in a fast-talking Jewish family, interrupting each other constantly. And it's been actually a really good experience for me to let the film evolve more at Samuel's pace, whether it involves how we're traveling or how Samuel is dictating his voiceover very slowly and deliberately, or just the fact that we need to block in lots of extra time to get places like we did today and get settled in, make sure we're here. So I think that has actually been healthy for me to slow down a little bit and to make sure that we are not rushing things so fast that Samuel can't participate in the most authentic way in every part of the process. And we also have learned to prepare a lot. You know, Samuel, as you saw, it takes him a long time to dictate answers. So Jesse and I had a funny conversation where he had a couple of new questions he wanted to add in. I said, we don't have time for the hours it's going to take for Samuel to dictate those out. So let's go with some that he's been working on already. So that's some of the strategy that we employ for this. So you have kind of a follow-up question, I think, for Samuel that'll tie into this.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, so Samuel, your dad was saying you were going to share some stories too. So what was the best part of creating the film for you? And what was the most challenging part of creating the film for you?
I love to travel, so my favorite part of making the film was going around the country with my dad, seeing new places, filming with my GoPros, and meeting all of these cool adults with disabilities. Like Keith Jones, who is a hip-hop musician and human rights advocate. He is hilarious. Setting up and getting all of the interviews done was the most challenging part of creating the film. We had to fly or drive a long way for the interviews. On our flight to Indianapolis, they turned my power wheelchair on its side both ways, and it got damaged both ways. On our trip to DC we had a 6-hour flight delay, and then as we were finally boarding our plane, another passenger talked down to me, like I was a 3-year-old. I wanted to curse at her but didn't. On our NYC trip I had a seizure. But we still got the filming done on all the trips.
Do you want to share what you wanted to say in that moment but didn't say? I wanted to say, what the fuck? It's an adult audience. I think you can handle it.
This is Jesse. Audrey will have to talk later about whether we have to bleep the recorded version. But thank you. I wondered when I watched that part of the film. So Dan, for the next question, what's one piece of advice that you'd have for parents or families to support their children, to tell their story, and also recognizing that we probably got quite a few people here from the Vermont Family Network from this morning.
I mean, everyone's going to share their story in their own unique way, and I think creating space for them to do that, and speaking from a place of passion. And I tell this not just to people with disabilities, but to anybody, especially young people who just want to be storytellers, you know, whether they have a disability or not. Talk about what you're passionate about. And that if you're a student that's struggling in school in some way, or struggling to make friends or navigate the world, find your passion. And hopefully you're, as family members, you will support that passion. And that's, I mean, none of my siblings have disabilities, but the thing I'm most thankful to my parents for is supporting our passions growing up. I had a passion for photography. They let me build a darkroom in our basement. And every birthday when I had that list of the camera piece that I wanted, they found a way to get it for me. My sister was a potter. They let her build a pottery wheel in our basement. My brother was a drummer. They had a drum set in the basement. You know, not everyone, money's a factor and all these other things, but just supporting your kids to share their stories. And then, specifically for kids like Samuel that might have communication challenges, working with the very talented people like we do who can help access technology. We're going to say something? What's that? Yeah, a girlfriend, Sam was saying, finding ways to support all your passions. This is what Samuel's passionate about right now, is finding a girlfriend, one of many things. So I think, just like the switch you see Samuel using today and the device, that was all navigated with the help of speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, help us find the right chair. So it's not, you can't do this alone, I guess is the message, find a team, find your community, as Samuel said. Samuel has amazing direct support professionals, one of whom is here today, Emily, who make everything tick. I mean, without the support of these folks, Sam would not have the very independent, fun 23-year-old life that he has.
Great, thank you. And the next question is about communication device technology. Samuel, this one's for you. But also, I do want to say there's many folks at our center who focus on supporting communication, and we also have folks that focus on assistive technology. So this is near and dear to a lot of their hearts and their work. So Samuel, communication device technology, like augmentative and assistive communication, can be very time consuming and frustrating. How did you try to capture that in the film?
I agree that it is really slow and frustrating to use a device, especially because it's gotten harder to move my arms because of my GNAO1 neurodevelopmental disorder. And it is really hard for me to talk. That's why we put the scene in the film where I'm speaking out the words one by one, and my dad is repeating them. Then we show him programming them into the device. I think that shows that it takes a long time to get the words into my device. We also showed Bob slowly typing his words in his scene. We also wanted to show that I communicate better with people that are patient, and who talk to me in an age-appropriate way.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So that was the end of our prepared questions. Gonna check the time. It's 3:44. So we're going to open it up to audience questions now. What we'll do is I'm going to turn, if we can get Audrey, who is online, on the screen. We might have a little bit of back and forth communication with the in-person and online crowd. I believe Audrey has a question maybe ready from chat. If not, I'll go to somebody in the audience here, and then we'll go back and forth. So after that first question, if anyone in the audience here in the Davis Center has a question, just raise your hand and I'll come over to you with the mic. So this is Jesse. Audrey, sounds like we should be able to hear you now, if not see you. Do you want to try saying something?
This is Audrey. Are you able to hear me?
We are able to hear you. Hi, Audrey.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we have a question here in the chat from Barbara Suter, who asks, how can we contribute on a personal and social level to the issues that we see in the film?
So this is Jesse. I'll say, hi, Mom. Thank you for that question. And I'm going to hand Dan the microphone.
Since your mom asked the question, could you repeat it? And I don't think I fully got it.
So my brain kind of turned off after Audrey said my mom's name. Audrey, would you ask that question again, please? To further my embarrassment.
Sure. The question is, how could we contribute on a personal, social, and community level to fix some of the issues we saw in your films?
So Samuel, you have an answer you've thought about in the past that I think helps address this. So whenever you're ready, you can hit that and I'll start until then. I think that I always tell people to think about your own sphere of influence, right? I mean, it can be very overwhelming to think about all these enormous challenges around ableism and access and education. You can't fix it all. I can't fix it all. Samuel can't fix it all. But you can each think about your sphere of influence. So is your family a place where you can work on ableism and on getting them to understand diversity by talking about it, by seeing movies like ours or like Crip Camp or so many other great movies that are out there around disability rights? Are you somebody that feels comfortable going before your school board and talking about the benefits of inclusion, whether or not you have a child with a disability in the district? You know, are you somebody that wants to volunteer in your child's classroom? Are you somebody that wants to work to make sure your downtown is more accessible to wheelchair users? You know, are you somebody who just really wants to write a letter to the editor? You know what I mean? There's so many ways that you can have an impact. Some people will run for office. Some people will, have big spheres of influence, but that doesn't have to be everybody because it can become overwhelming. So Sam, I think about your own experience growing up in Concord and how the community itself has become and has been a supportive place for you. Do you want to chime in on that? And I think that partially answers Jesse's mother's question. Barbara, right? Barbara.
It was awesome to grow up in Concord. The schools were inclusive and accessible. Concord has done a good job about being more accessible. When I was a kid, I could not get into most restaurants and shops downtown. But since they renovated, I am able to get into most places. There is still work to be done, like the football bleachers at Memorial Field. I am not able to get all the way up in the bleachers with my family and friends. My chair blocks the aisle when I am sitting down in the accessible section. But I still think Concord is a great place to grow up and live as an adult with a disability.
And we were actually telling a funny story on the drive up today about testifying before the city council. Samuel went to testify about the fact that the bleachers, which are owned by the city, should be more accessible. It's ridiculous. The chair gets up there, and as he said, nobody can get past him. So Betsy, my wife, his mom, kept asking, "Are you nervous? Are you nervous about going to testify?" He's like, "Not nervous, not nervous." Samuel never gets nervous with public speaking, ever. And then he walks into the room, and I guess they had some police matter on the docket as well, because the whole back wall is just lined with police officers, and Samuel just goes, "Nervous, nervous." But I do, in this context, I do want to give a big shout out to Betsy too, my wife, Betsy McNamara, Samuel's mom, and Isaiah's mom, because she's, we're out there in the front of the visibility in terms of these films and things, but she's doing so much behind the scenes, not just within our family, which is huge. Like, she's the Medicaid master and the navigating healthcare issues master and insurance appeals and the stuff you all know is a big part of our lives. But she also served on the committee that helped redesign downtown Concord and made it, which I think is arguably the most accessible downtown in all of New England now. If you have a chance, stop through Concord, New Hampshire, because every sidewalk is beautifully accessible. Every storefront has been made accessible. Every light has audio and bleeping lights again and again and again. And she was on that committee. She's on the board. She's been on for 20 years, been on the board of our area agency that serves people with disabilities. She chairs the board of our local affordable housing, organization, the Loan Fund. So I just, she deserves kudos too, because I think, thanks, Emily. She doesn't always get to the forefront, but I actually, I do love watching, including Samuel, because it reminds me just what a powerful voice she's been for change, in our family and in the community.
This is Jesse. Is this working? Sounds like it's working. Great. I saw a hand go up over here. So we'll do a question in the in-person audience. And then I'll turn it back to you, Audrey, for another question online if we've got any more.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for sharing this film in progress and including Samuel. That was just really beautiful and very moving. I want to congratulate Samuel for being part of the Environmental Action Club at his college, because of course the climate crisis is something we've all got to care about and be working on and find our own entry point. So bravo, Samuel, for being a leader in that respect. I'm curious, what will be the length of the finished film and when can we look forward to it being released? I'm also curious who's going to be the first name credited. I'm also a filmmaker, and in fact, I'm working on a film with my 24-year-old autistic son, Gabriel, about the transition to adulthood, and its working title is Turning 22. And I have to say, interestingly, Gabriel's primary preoccupation right now is finding a girlfriend. So I'm seeing some commonalities here, and wondering if you have any advice. If what are we gonna do? What are you guys gonna do? We got to help you find these partners. And you know, as a mother, it's like, well, I don't know, Gabe. I think getting out there and meeting more people is probably your best bet. But anyway, I'm also part of a group of families working on getting more housing options in Vermont. It's a big issue here, and we're part of the Developmental Disability Housing Initiative. We were at the State House a couple weeks ago. We had a big lobby day. And so it's just great to be here, and thank you both for being here and sharing your work with us today.
Well, thank you.
My name's
for-
Donna Roberts.
Thanks, Dawn. You said Dawn. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for many, many points of overlap. So thank you for sharing all that. Wow. All right. Do you want to take on the girlfriend part? Any advice to your son what was your son's name? Gabriel. Any thoughts for Gabriel that you want to share?
We created an advisory board for the new film project. Everyone on the advisory board are young adults with disabilities. Advisory board members gave us awesome feedback on the OpDocs film, and they will be giving us their feedback on early cuts of the feature-length film and for our educational materials and outreach and publicity campaigns.
So that was a partial answer to one of your questions, which was about the feature-length film and kind of how it's coming to be. So Samuel just shared, and maybe some overlap with the other question too. Samuel shared that one of the ways we're bringing the film to fruition is involving young adults with disabilities in that same transition age to giving us a lot of feedback. And they were very formative in this New York Times OpDoc cut. And we're about to share with them a cut of the feature. So that's great insight. Would you, in terms of, and I'll talk more about the film in a second, but in terms of finding a girlfriend, what kind of advice have you been getting, or what kind of advice, anything that you want to share or could think of? Yes or no, it's up to you. Anything you've been doing to try and move in that direction that maybe Gabriel could feel a kinship with? Get out. You said get out and what? Get out and date. That's a great goal. I think we've been talking a lot. And again, Emily and the other wonderful direct support professionals who are much closer in age to Samuel than we are have been the guiding force in this effort. And that is just the way it should be. You know, Betsy and I are trying to get out of the way, and we're happily extracting ourselves from any part of Samuel's dating efforts. And his brother too, Isaiah, has definitely given advice. I remember he said to you recently, besides what you saw in the film, which was good advice. But anyway, the advice that Isaiah gave, which I think is in the same vein, is just, you got to meet a lot of people. You know, Isaiah said, I have to meet like 10 or 20 or more young women, you know, for me to find someone that there might be a connection with. And Samuel, you might need to meet that many or more. So the only way to do it is just get out into the community and get into places where you're going to meet a lot of young people. So these guys have been trying to make that happen, you know, through college and other venues. And I mean, we all know, you just never know, you know. I was traveling in China on my own when I was age 22 doing journalism, and I met Betsy, who happened to be traveling in China at the same time. I did not think I was going to meet my future wife in the small village of China, but that's what happened. So you just don't know where this stuff's going to happen. And just quickly on the film front, we are really deep in production right now. It's really exciting, creative, challenging process to take hours and hours and dozens and hundreds of hours of footage and try and get it down to a 90-minute film, which is the target time. And we're lining up for an early 2024 release, like a film festival start in, hopefully a big film festival in early 2024. And then for the next year or two, we'll be rolling it out through educational kits and through screenings and broadcasts and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So thanks for asking all about all that.
Great. So this is Jesse again. Audrey, I was going to see if there's another question from online.
This is Audrey. We do have another question from online. That question is, how do the two of you feel about the word disability? Some people do not like it and prefer other words to describe any challenges they face.
Think about that. How do we feel about the word disability? We might not feel the same way, but I think we're feeling similar about it. I am completely fine with it. Like, I actually think it's, when I speak, some of you probably know, or most of you probably know, Judy Human passed away about a month and a half ago. And she was a huge part of our life and world. And she always made us feel that way, even though there were probably 100 people that were closer to her, at least, but she always made us feel like we were incredibly important to her. And we did stay in good touch with her. And and she is very much about disability first language. And so in Judy, we trust, she would say, I'm a disabled person and there are non-disabled people. And that's the way she would frame things. And she actually, you may have seen, she did a great interview with Trevor Noah, and he used the word able-bodied, and she like interrupted him and corrected him and said, no, it's non-disabled. I don't like the word able-bodied because I'm able in my own way, So, and Trevor Noah was like, okay, I should not mess with this woman, which was good. So I feel that personally, I feel like the word disabled has been kind of claimed or reclaimed by the disability community. Same like words crip. Words I don't like, and I don't think either of us like, are special education. I would very much happily purge that from our language because we're all, whatever. I mean, special, what makes Samuel more special than his friend Jacob? They're both great guys. And I think it's just language that's really outdated. So do you agree or disagree with what I'm saying? Do you give a thumbs up or say yes or no to that?
Yeah.
All right, agree. And you actually have a response that's related to that you've programmed in here. If you want to go ahead and share that, it's all tied to the same question.
Yeah.
Go ahead and hit that.
The only thing I don't like about having a disability is that sometimes people talk to me like I'm a 3-year-old. And my genetic disorder has made it more difficult to drive my chair by myself and use my communication device. But I'm proud to be a part of the disability community, and I have an awesome team of support people every day.
This is Jesse again. Thank you both for those answers. I wonder if there's any more questions from the audience here in the Davis Center. I see Nicole's hand went up, so I'm coming over to you.
Question, Jesse, but no, I think I know what it is.
Okay.
m- my question is for Samuel and Dan, how has filming and advocating and like Samuel goes to college now, how has that affected like the life? Because I went to college at UVM and I was a Think College student through UVM, and I also have a disability growing up with autism and other disabilities mixed in. And how has and I've always wanted to do filming and advocating for, so I guess what advice would you have for someone who wants to tell their own story and be able to and who has a disability to grow and learn and succeed through their next work with advocacy and disability with college and stuff?
I know it's a great question. I know Samuel has composed some thoughts about advice in general around inclusion, which I think includes college, right? So do you want to share that? And then maybe I can touch and you can share anything else you want to her question, but I can share a little more thoughts on her question. You can go ahead anytime you're ready.
My advice to children, teens, and young adults with disabilities is to find your community. One of my mentors, Maysoon Zaid, told me this. My advice to parents is to include your kids in everything, like my family has done. My advice to schools and colleges is to be inclusive. All of my schools have been inclusive and that made a big impact on my education. Find new ways to help people with disabilities, especially for employment and social life.
So in addition to what Samuel said, I think you sound like you're a great advocate, for your own life. And it's interesting. Another word that I have a little trouble with is self-advocacy, in the sense that you're not just advocating for yourself, you're advocating for a society to change. You're advocating for all people with disabilities by pushing to go to college, by pushing for employment, by creating more accessible communities. You're not just advocating for yourself, and Liz Weintraub, who's a great advocate I know in DC, always talks about that. I'm not a self-advocate, I'm just an advocate. So I think that by you determining how you want to live your life, by you making choices like to go to college, you're setting, a road for other people. You're creating a roadmap, so to speak, for a lot of other people to follow you. And I think what Samuel was just saying is you need help from communities, from colleges, from schools, from families that have the same high expectations and that have the same commitment to creating access, right? And I think just like the way that this event today was structured, to have ASL interpretation, to have CART, to have an online option and an in-person option, to ask people to wear masks, to be respectful of health, all those things are wonderful examples of accessibility. And I think sets a really high bar, for how events like this should be. So I hope that touches on a little bit of your question. You can take the mic again so we can hear you.
How Dan do you get into like advocating because at some point I want to tell my story and film and then work on my goals with advocating for my journey, because it wasn't always easy.
I bet. I'm sure it wasn't. I think the good thing about the way our society and our media is structured right now is there's a lot of avenues to tell your story, right? Social media has so many different avenues to tell your story. YouTube, blogging, there's just so many different ways to get your story out there that I think if you tell it authentically and with all your heart and with honesty, it'll resonate with people, and then and even if whether it's 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people that see it, if you want to share your story, you should, and you should put it out there, as widely as you feel comfortable. I know Samuel had, Jesse, I don't know if there's more questions right now, but Jesse, I know Samuel had a question about media portrayal ready to be answered, which kind of relates to this, I think, this theme that we're talking about. Do you want to address that question of Samuel and he can answer?
This is Jesse. I'm running up to the front where the questions are. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. And then Audrey, this is your cue. After this question, we'll see if there's another one online. I do remember liking the question. I don't remember exactly how we worded it. So give me a moment. Okay. Yeah. So Samuel, how do you feel about the media portrayal of people with disabilities?
People with disabilities should have their voices heard and we should be able to tell our stories. I don't like that movies and stories about people with disabilities are often about curing or saving or even killing the person because they have a disability. Or you will see someone with a disability have an awesome talent at something and people will be inspired and respond to the talent in a way they might not to someone that doesn't have a disability.
So I think kind of that tags on to your point about authentic storytelling, which we try and do in all of our films, to not sugarcoat things, just be really honest, I think has a lot of power, you know, not make things look too simple, too easy, or too obvious, you know.
So thank you. So this is Jesse. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Audrey, is there any questions from the online audience?
This is Audrey. There is one last question from the online audience. They were wondering, do you have any advice, either of you, for young adults with disabilities who are looking to move out of their parents' home? Any advice in terms of resources or methods? Thank you.
Is there anything you want to say to that, Samuel?
Be patient and do not talk
Oh,
down
wait.
to me.
This is a
Be
related-
patient and do not.
This is kind of a related question we're ready to talk about in terms of communication tips. And so let's do that one next, and I'll address the housing issue. And then if you want to chime in, okay? It's a tough question. You know, it's really tough. We went through a long process of figuring things out in Samuel's life because we really wanted Samuel to live as far away from us as he felt comfortable, you know, which might just be downtown Concord. We're about 3 miles outside of downtown. You know, we talked at times about going to like UNH or university. And then we had a really scary medical crisis, right? Where Samuel's baclofen pump failed very suddenly and he was in like critical condition within hours and we had to get him up to Dartmouth. And this was just a couple years ago. And it made us all as a family do some planning together about what feels right, you know, for us as a family, because every family is different. Everybody has different realities. And what we felt would be the way we want to do it was we would build an addition onto our garage where Sam would have his own space. My wife and I would have our own space, but it would be easy for us to go back and forth. So Sam has a very separate space where he can live. And we feel a great sense of thankfulness and privilege that we were able to do that. Not everyone has the land or the ability or money or whatever. So we recognize that, but we were able to do that. And now that's how Samuel lives. I will say that if you're available for Section 8 housing and you're not familiar with Section 8, that's a really important federal subsidy that some people will qualify for. Samuel qualified for it. The level of his disability got him bumped up a little bit, which you could also explore in terms of, because there can be like 5-10 years of waiting lists for Section 8 housing. But thankfully, you know, sometimes when you have a significant disability, there are some perks that come with that, like getting bumped up the list for Section 8. And so that has made it financially kind of work for us because the Section 8 voucher helps pay Samuel's rent. Samuel gets paid for events like this. And, you know, he's earning a salary for all the work we're doing on the film. So he also pays us rent as part of from his own hard-earned money. So I'm not, you know, this is just one family story and there are so many stories. I think we also try and advocate on a larger societal level for more affordable housing in general and accessible housing as best we can. So Jesse, I know Samuel had queued up what I think is a really great response to another question we had talked about. I'm just going to get you back in the right spot, Samuel, about communication tips. I don't know if you want to ask that question. It's a really well thought out answer, I think.
Pausing for it to come on. This is Jesse. Yes, I'd be happy to ask that question. And also we will have time for another question from the audience. So get ready. And then I lost where I was. There we go, Samuel. Can you share some tips on communicating with I think we got the wording of this wrong. Can you share some tips on communicating with you and also perhaps other people with communication challenges?
For all the Joes out there at the airport.
Be patient and do not talk down to me. Ask me how I best communicate. Slow down the pace of the conversation to create more space for me to contribute. If you don't understand me, ask me to repeat what I said. If I'm typing on my device, don't start another conversation. Please wait for me to finish.
Yeah, I think that like sums it up so beautifully, how to be respectful of other people's communication styles and create space for that communication. So great work, Samuel.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is Jesse again. Are there any questions in the in-person audience? Oh, I saw two hands go up at the same time.
We can take, if you're okay with it, we'll take those two.
Okay. So we'll start here in the front, then I'll come.
So I have a question around, have there been times where your boundaries and your advocacy were not listened to, and how did you navigate that? Also, there have been times where I have been wanting to do everything, even the daily chores, but my disability sometimes prevents me from achieving that. So I was wondering, in what ways also have you adapted your goals and aspects of your daily life for yourself?
I apologize. I heard about half of that because
Yeah.
just I think it's the mask and maybe the volume, but I didn't hear it that clearly. If you don't, if you don't
Yeah.
mind repeating it.
Okay. So there have been times where, or have there been times where your boundaries and your advocacy were not listened to? And how did you navigate that? Additionally, for me, there have been times where I've been wanting to do everything from daily chores, but my disability sometimes makes it hard for me to achieve everything. And I was wondering, in what ways have you adapted your goals or aspects of daily life for yourself to make it more manageable?
So in terms of updating goals, I mean, this is really, Samuel, your question, but I mean, one, and I know it's getting a little late in the day, but one thing you've thought about is, how you would navigate something next time in terms of being respected, like you felt somewhat disrespected in that airport conversation. Do you have a way to, maybe a suggestion for how you might navigate that differently in terms of your expectations of yourself and other people?
I want to curse at people who talk down to me, like Joe, the woman at the airport, in the film. But I did not because I'm afraid that people would get mad at me. Next time, I will say, talk to me like I'm an adult. I am learning a lot from people with disabilities, that it's not easy to be an adult with a disability. But I'm learning from them how to be a better disability rights advocate for my life, and for other people with disabilities.
So I feel like that partially answers your question. And the other thing I would just add is Ali Stroker in our feature-length film talked to Samuel about ninja patience and how she's needed to develop ninja patience because her disability affects her differently every day. And she needs to just be incredibly nimble and flexible. And I think that's what we've learned is like every day is going to be a little different. And you seize the moments like this when we can be here doing this great event. And then there are days where Samuel's just going to not feeling well. And it's just going to like chill and watch Friends all day, right? And that's okay. Like it's okay to know that life is going to be different every day. And we as a family have just learned an incredible amount of patience and trying to be flexible. And that helps with a lot of parts of life, not just around disability, I think. So hopefully that makes some sense, to just make your expectations variable every day, depending on where your energy is. And I think that's good advice for anybody, really, not disabled or not. So there's somebody else. One other question we'll take that somebody had.
Hi, thanks. It sounds like you guys were really lucky to be in environments where folks were receptive to being supportive and being inclusive and knew what that meant. I was especially struck by the principal at that school who was saying that the teachers can only, like work within what they have, and that we need to train them. And that it's really easy to do inclusivity poorly. And I have been finding that a lot of folks in my son's school district are super receptive and in agreement with what I'm saying. And we're really squeaky wheels. And he gets placed with great teachers who are really good at it, but there are other kids who are struggling and there aren't large swaths of training happening across our district. And anytime I ask, they say, yeah, that's a great idea. We're limited on time. We're limited on funding. Let's see what we can do. And until I start squeaking again, there's nothing. Do you have any advice for turning that into action and something that is happening beyond just the people who we connect with directly?
Well, I'll try to take this one on as a parent. Keep squeaking is my biggest advice. You do need to advocate. You do need to keep squeaking. And I think probably some of the best advice, the two best pieces of advice I ever got. One was from Bob Williams, who you saw in my disability roadmap, the gentleman that types to communicate, who said, when I was 3 years old, I got a chance to talk to Bob, and he said, give Samuel choices at every juncture. Just continually give him choices. And Emily was just saying today that there's been some studies said you make approximately 5,000 choices a day in your life, which sounds like an enormous amount. But if you think about every single little incremental moment of your day, you have to choose to do something or not do something that maybe it's right. So I think that was great advice. But the other advice that I got from another parent during a presentation for Including Samuel was, I will never apologize for advocating for my child. I only get one chance at this parenting thing, and I'm not going to apologize for advocacy. And I think you kind of, you want to do it diplomatically and you want to do it collaboratively, and I'm sure you do. And that's always been our approach. But occasionally it's okay to get pissed off, right? As you do very occasionally, Samuel. Occasionally it's okay to say, no, I know my rights and I know IDEA law and I know I have a right to this, whatever that might be, like the least restrictive environment with the supports and accommodations that your child needs to be successful, which is the law, which is IDEA. So I think, knowing the law, knowing your rights, working with advocates from your community, like the Vermont Family Network or other advocates who maybe can help bolster your confidence if that needs to happen during an IEP meeting or something. And really listening to your child and making sure that they're feeling supported at school, and hopefully their peers can also tell you about what they're seeing in school. Some of Samuel's peers were some of our best spies. They would tell us what was happening or not happening during the school day when he was younger and had trouble communicating that to us, So we could talk about this for a long time, but the main thing is know your rights, don't apologize for your advocacy, and keep advocating. And because you'll pave the way not just for your child, but for other kids too, who come after your child. So I know Samuel's running out of steam, but I wanted to let Samuel finish, if it's okay with everyone, with his own dreams for his future, because you've got a lot of good plans in the works. So I kind of asked the question, unless you want to ask it again, Jesse. But
So Samuel, the next question is for you. What are your dreams for the future?
I dream about getting married, having kids, and making more films. I am thinking about transferring to a 4-year college in the future and traveling around the country and the world. I want to go to the Football Hall of Fame, Mount St. Helens, a Seattle Mariners game, London, and Europe. I also want to get married and have kids someday.
Great. Well, thank you. And based on the questions, I think some that I saw in the chat and certainly in the room, I think a lot of people are interested in what's next. And so I know there's a lot of interest in the full feature-length film that's coming out next year. So we're going to get to learn a little bit more about your roadmap. And yeah, keep coming back. I can't wait for the film after that. I know you guys get that question a lot.
No, we're excited to come back with the full film, and hopefully make that happen next year. I will say that if you're interested in learning about where things are at with the film, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. My Disability Roadmap is on Facebook and Instagram, and My Dis Roadmap on Twitter. And we're constantly not just telling people about the film, but we're sharing really what we think are important resources. And we do a series of talks called Our Disability Roadmap, in which Samuel's been interviewing people about their own experiences. We just did one with Bob Williams that we're sending a recording out this week, which was incredible. It was like an hour long. And we did one with Judy Heumann before she died that we're rebroadcasting on April 21st. So if you go to any of our social media channels, you'll find out how to sign up for that series, and it's free, and it's just really, really powerful. So that's it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing those. Yeah. All right. Well, and thank you to all of you. As I really like the advice of slow down and take more time. I feel like we've done that today. I know a lot of you have done that. So please join me in a round of applause for our guests, Dan and Samuel Habib.
Thank you. Just want to thank you again for being here today, for sticking it out, both the people in person and online, and for CDCI and all your partners, for Vermont Family Network, anyone who played a role in this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, so do I. It was a pleasure. And as I said earlier, and thank you for the kudos and the accessibility. We are very much learning how to do more accessible events, especially during COVID. And so we're trying, but we would really love to hear from you about how today went and what could we do better next time. So everyone who's registered for the event, you're going to get an email from me asking you to fill out a survey, but we read everyone, and we're going to use it for every event that we plan after this. So I hope to get your feedback. And if you'd rather, there's comment cards that you can just fill out on your way out and just put in the basket by the door. So thank you again for coming. Have a great rest of your day.
It was great to be with you today. Thanks so much for having me.